Okay, so this should be the end of chapter 19, which is on populations. And so today's topic is very important and very relevant to our times right now, which is human population growth. Um, I don't remember what the rate that the world population is growing, but I think I've got a video and I think of a website which actually tracks it, which I'll get to in a minute. So the first thing that we want to look at is the history of human population growth. The origin of our species, Homo sapiens, was more than 500,000 years ago. And the population overall grew very slowly until about between 10 and 12,000 years ago. So if you look at history and you study history, the things that you want to look at are like what was happening at around this time that caused, I guess, what you would call the human population explosion. And so when we look at what happened between 10 and 12,000 years ago, we find that there was a really big, what do you call that? Change to how we lived. So at the time, we lived in small nomadic groups. Nomadic just means that we kept moving around. And so we hunted animals, gathered roots, berries, nuts, etc. So we started with what's called the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Now, that by itself keeps the population numbers down because you can't basically have a nomadic lifestyle if you have a population of even 100 people or 200 people would be a lot of people to pick up and move. So having a nomadic lifestyle really kept the population down just because it's easier to have small groups of people that can either like live in straw or mud huts or tents or something that you can pack up and move all of your things. So the first thing that happened in our history that contributes to the explosion of the human population is the development of agriculture. We discovered how to domesticate animals and grow crops. And so that point in time, if you look back 10 to 12,000 years ago, there's pudding. Hold on. If you look back, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah. If you look back 10 to 12,000 years ago, you find that this is where the agricultural revolution occurred. Now, this led to huge changes because not only are we staying in one spot and building an entire community around that one location, but we're also then able to, like I said, we domesticate animals. We use animals not just for food, but for labor as well. And growing crops is a huge, huge change in our lifestyle. This not only stabilized our food supply, but it also increased it. So it stabilizes our food supply because we're basically not hunting it. And the reason why we had such a nomadic lifestyle before this is because if there's no food in the area where you're living, just as animals have to do in nature, you have to go to a different area to find the food. Like we go where the food is. Having a farm or having a small garden, that allows you to stay in one place. It also increases your food supply because you've got large amounts of land that you can plant crops and grow or raise animals. So the human population started to grow faster. Oh, there's Ploy. 1 second. Mhm. Okay. Oops. Oh, my computer's beeping at me. All right. So for the beginning of human civilization, 500,000 years ago, the population grew slowly until about 10,000 years ago, where we developed agriculture. And so the population grows faster. So 10,000 years ago, there were between 2 and 20 million people. Just 8,000 years later, 2,000 years ago, that increased to between 170 to 330 million. So it really is, if you put it in a graph, you look at just what the population explosion and is an explosion, what that looks like. So if you just look at the timeline in history, so 1 AD, this would be 2020 years ago. So that's not even really that big, but look at what happened. Basically, if you look at what is happening. So I said 10 to 15,000, or sorry, 10 to 12,000 years ago, that would be around here. You can see how low the population is growing. And then that little bump right here, that little bump, that's the agricultural revolution. Okay, that's when we figured out how to stay in one place, raise animals, and grow food. So then the second question becomes, what the hell happened here? Okay, you can see this little tiny dip there. That is labeled here the Black Death or the plague that killed off, I believe, 30% of Europe in one go. But right after that, in that part, what do you have here? And the answer to that is basically the Industrial Revolution. So from the Agricultural Revolution, growth continued through the Middle Ages, even with short-term reversals. If I go here and we find, the Middle Ages. So you can see the growth is steadily climbing, but not totally out of control. And then you have the Middle Ages. After that, then we have the modern age, which is just crazy time with, what do you call it? Population growth. So 5 years between 1347 and 1352, the bubonic plague killed about, okay, I wasn't wrong, it was not 30, but 25% of Europe. After let's not get ahead of ourselves. 1650 is when the Industrial Revolution occurred. Okay, so after 1650, growth accelerated because of a decline in death rates. Why is death rate decreasing? Well, several reasons. One, we have better sanitation and hygiene. Before 1650, we didn't have plumbing. There were like no water pipes. Maybe there was like a community well. Like I'm talking well where you had to use like pump the water out. There were no bathrooms. There was definitely no indoor plumbing. So back then, how did you use the bathroom? Generally, you would either go outside directly, or if you were super high-so and very rich, you had what's called a chamber pot, and that was a ceramic pot that you used to go to the bathroom in, and then you would store that under your bed. I know it sounds disgusting, and it is disgusting. Why humans would do that, I have no idea. But yeah, we stored it under the bed, and then in the morning, you would literally dump it in the street, like outside of your house. So things were super, super gross and dirty back then. We had better control of disease because we have some medicines at that point. We have an increased availability of food. So people are not getting sick and dying from famine or starvation. And we have increased economic conditions. So in the year 1650, there were 500 million people. So let's just go back and look at what we had before the populations. If my slides want to work. Right. So 10,000 years, we have 2 to 20 million people. 2,000 years ago, 170 to 300 million. We can just make that in the middle at like, what, 250 would be about in the middle, 250 million. That's 2,000 years ago. And then we go to 1650 would be, let's just say about 500 years ago. It's twice that. So we're basically doubling every few hundred years. Okay. So 1650, 500 million people. In 1800, so 250 years later, we doubled that to 1 billion people. 1930, another 100 years after that, we doubled it again. So in half the time, just look at half the time. There's 250 years here, and there's only 130 between the next doubling. So we are increasing at twice the rate in half the time, if that makes sense. The death rates fell again following World War II. This is because the improvements in health and hygiene in poorer countries and the fact that birth rates remained high. That's nice. Nope. Okay. So here's something that I find very, very interesting as a statistic. It took most of human history for humans to reach 1 billion people. Okay. So just think Homo sapiens has been around about 500,000 years. It took most of that time for us to reach 1 billion people. And the population grew from 3 to 6.5 billion in the last 40 years. And that's even coming from this book, which is out of date, which means our population is like 1 billion more than this. I think it's at 7.5 billion right now. And I was around when it hit 7 billion. I think I have a video for that. Hold on. Human population. So, oh my God, it's 7.9 billion. That's nuts. This is unsustainable. Remember when I taught you last week about carrying capacity, and that every species on Earth has a carrying capacity where, was it Thomas Malthus? I think there was was he a philosopher? Probably. But he basically said there's 3 things that are going to control the human population. I think that's famine, war, and disease, something like that. And you can see coronavirus trying real hard to help out with that. So 1 dot is 1 million people that you see on the graph. Down here, they're going to label major historical events, I guess. So you've got at this point, starting at year 1, I guess, you've got the Roman Empire and the Han Dynasty in China. Just to point out, by the way, if you look at human growth before this, there's basically what I look at is like 2 periods of human history. There's like the, I guess, I wouldn't say prehistoric, but like everything before the agricultural revolution, where you see that farming was developed and you see that spike in human population, but you almost have to separate that from what's coming up now, which is after farming was invented, because you can't fit both this human growth and what's coming up on this graph on the same scale. Go back to where we were. Yep, there we go. So you can see how the population is increasing on the bottom, 174, 175. And this is just million, huh? There's the Silk Road. We're up to 182 million. So still pretty slow, I guess. There's the golden age of India. The Mayan civilization, those are the Native Americans in Central America. But you can see the increase in population is not exponential at this point. Oh, I didn't know smallpox had Japan. Interesting. So you can see the total human population at the top. It's the speed at which we're increasing is increasing. Accelerating, I guess that's what I mean to say. That was with Genghis Khan. There's the Black Plague, and you can see a bunch of dots disappearing from Europe. Europeans arrive in Central America. There's the slaves. We're in the 1600s now. And there it is. You see how it increased there? There we go. Industrial Revolution. Now we're in the billions. And you just look at how the Industrial Revolution changed our growth rate. Even with World War I, World War II, and now look at that. It's just, oh my God. So I don't know what year that is. 2100 be 11 billion. Oh, okay. That kind of looks like it's approaching carrying capacity, actually. Ah, yeah, that's interesting. So growth is slowing because the average fertility rates are falling in nearly every country. So fertility is not how many children you choose to have, but how many children you can have. So if you look at 1950, fertility was 5 babies per woman, and now it's 2. That's interesting. Now you see them both in one graph. So this is the big problem. It's like, if you think about the fact that, like, you look at this graph, it actually looks like a logistical model, right? With us reaching carrying capacity and leveling off. But here's the problem. When you talk about resources, which is why we have to address these problems, having a growth rate like this is unsustainable because we use up resources on Earth and we don't replenish them, and we don't seem, well, let me put it this way, governments don't seem to have the urgency with which to implement the measures necessary to stop climate change. So even if we were able to naturally achieve carrying capacity population, we are destroying the planet as we're doing so. So the problem is resources. So this is why, in my mind, it's so important for younger generations to step up and um, be active in their communities, because if you leave it up to I'll just say like the older people, the ones that are generally in power, um, that's why I love Greta Thunberg, the Swedish girl who goes around and basically chastises everyone for like not doing enough for the environment. I'll have to find the clip. I mean, she's like, I think she's 17 or 18 now. I can't remember. And she gets up at these world conventions. I mean, like, you've got world leaders that are there. And like, there was one clip, if I could find it, I'll send it to you in line. In part of my president's agenda at the moment, he calls it the Build Back Better, basically like investing in climate changes and things like that. And she was basically just got up there and she's like, build back better, blah blah blah, you know, economic this, blah blah blah. She's like, a lot of you guys are just sitting around and like you're talking a lot of things, but like you're not doing anything about it. And it just reminds me of like the Paris Climate Accord. um, when was that? We did it under Obama. I remember Obama was president, so before 2016. And you had like all of these nations come together in Paris and agree to try to come up to some measures to stop climate change. Um, but I just think like what's actually happened? Like what have we actually done to try to help? Anyway, um, so as an older person, I apologize for all of our old generations for basically like leaving a crappy planet behind for you guys. Um, so what about our population growth today? The global growth rate peaked in 1960 at about 0.021 per capita. Again, per capita means per person. But what we're seeing now is in a lot of countries, birth rates are decreasing. Whether people are choosing, I think a lot of younger people are choosing not to have children for a multitude of reasons. There are many reasons not to. I chose not to have kids because I don't like kids. Um, and I know most students, when I say that, they're like, but you're a teacher. Yeah, but I teach teenagers. You guys are like real people, not like little kids. I don't understand them. And so I'm like, yeah, no, thanks. Um, so the current level of global growth rate is 0.014 per capita. So it is a decrease. So of course, putting those in percentages, it's 2% or down to 1.4%. But decreasing in growth rate does not mean our population size is decreasing. The population is growing more now than in 1960 because our population is much larger now. So even a decrease in birth rate, even a decrease in growth rate isn't enough to slow our exponential growth. So in 1970, there were 3.7 billion people and the growth rate was 1.96%. So if you take 3.7 billion people and you multiply that times the growth rate, you get 73 million people were added to the population in 1 year. So I think, yeah, I think this leads to, which means I have to share the screen. Oh yeah. So going to, here we go. You can actually watch the population increase in real time. So yeah, that's how many were increasing. And I remember, I think it wasn't too long ago that we hit 7 billion, and Nat Geo came out with a video to explain just how much 7 billion is, which I have coming up next, which I really like. But look at the population growth this year, just this year, 70 million people in 1 year. And you've got, look at the, yeah, so you've got births, 121 million, deaths, 50 million, although this is probably higher than normal because of COVID. But just in 1 day, you look at how many people we're adding in 1 day, over 100,000 people in a day. So you can always go there to contemplate life choices. Oh, where did it go? Oh, hold on a sec. Gotta find out where my keynote went. Aw, because I'm in full screen, so it disappears. There we go. All right, let's go back to play. So a really good, what do you call that? A really good comparison, if you look at what I just showed you, which says that we added about 70 million people this year, and you think, okay, well, in 1973 it was also about 70 million people, but we were much smaller. Oh, here's Jay. We were a much smaller population back then. Okay, why did I go back there? Hold on. There we go. Okay, yeah, so you've got a higher growth rate back then, but with fewer people, and we have a lower growth rate now, but we have many more people. There's like more than twice the number of people, which is why we're adding the same amount. So I think this is the 7 billion video, even though we're almost at 8 now, so they'll have to make a revised version. Yeah. Oh, that's loud. Right. So, okay, 2011, 10 years was 7 billion. So we've added a billion, almost a billion more people, because we're at 7.9 right now. And I'm guessing by the end of this year, since we're mid-November, we've got another, what is today? 12. So we've got about 5 weeks left to add 7.9, another million people. I don't know, whatever. I'm sure by the end of 2021, we'll probably be pretty close, if not at 8 billion. And we've done that in 10 years. 10 years. And it took 200,000 years for us to become 1 billion people since the beginning of our history. It's just weird. So, oh crap, I hate when that happens. I just want to go through and emphasize the statistics that they're giving us. I think they said it would, I guess we don't really need the music. They said it would take 7 years just to count to 7 billion out loud. So if you were to start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Oh, 200, sorry, my bad. 200 years just to count to 7 billion. Around the world, how many times? 133 times, 7 billion steps. And there we go. And you can see, like, every time we add a billion people, it gets less and less. I mean, the amount of time. But again, sorry, I keep pausing. But again, you see that, wait, there, you see that graph, it's starting to resemble the logistic model. So I guess we really can fit that many people. The problem, again, is not how many people are on the planet at one time. The problem is how fast we grew, and the fact that we're using resources that are limited. We're using resources like fossil fuels that are putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and heating up the globe, which is causing global warming, which causes more frequent and more severe weather, which we're also seeing. Massive floods in some parts of the world, or even some parts of the country. Like in America, you have the East Coast, which is underwater. There was like a month or two ago where there were all these videos on social media of people in the New York subway with water just pouring in. I think there was one with like a rat swimming around. And then on the West Coast in California, they have massive wildfires because it's so dry and they don't have any water. So we're adding 3 people per second. Yeah, that's the other problem. We live a lot longer. Look at that. 53 years is as old as you got. Holy cow, I wouldn't have that much longer left. Scary. Yeah, and this is the other thing. We're all moving towards cities. "21 megacities. And fewer people are living outside of the cities." Here's the weird part about it. That's why I think we can fit so many people on the planet. All of us would fit into Los Angeles. Nope. There's enough space. It's the resources. Yeah. So just look at that. 5% of us consume 23% of the world's energy. Again, it's all about resources. This is the other thing. 13% of the human population don't have clean drinking water. There are some people who spend 8 hours a day just walking to go get fresh water to bring back to the village or whatever. %. That's shocking to me. 38% don't have adequate sanitation. It's far too high. And there's no reason why we can't live in megacities that are also green as well. I think, is it Singapore or Hong Kong or somewhere in Japan? I can't remember where it is, but they have like greenhouses and gardens like growing on the sides of buildings. I don't know. I have to remember where that is. Okay, so I gotta update this, obviously. Right now there are 7.7 billion people. It's actually 7.9. And our current population growth, look at that, only 0.0107. It's much, much lower than it was in 1975. So if we calculate how many people will be added this year, you just take, it will have to be now 7.9. We'll just have it for next year, 7.9 billion. So that's million billion times 0.0107. And it's going to be a different number than what's coming up because on the slide I have 7.7. So 7, 9, and then how many zeros? 6, 8 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, okay. My phone doesn't even let me use numbers that big. So I use my calculator. 7, 9, and then 8 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 0.0107. Okay, so next year, if our growth stays the same, we're going to add 8, 4, 5, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, that many people. 84.5 million people we're going to add to the human population in the year 2022. So yeah, it's different than this number because I gotta, like I said, I gotta update that. About 20% of the world's population, and again, I'm gonna have to check these numbers because I have a feeling they're going to be out of date. Let me just Google real quick. Might be the same. What percentage of the world live, if I can type, live in developed countries? Okay. So according to the interwebs, it says the population of the world's developed countries is currently a little over 1.3 billion. This is about 17%. Okay, so we can round that up anyway. So that's about the same. Okay, so only 20% live in developed countries. These are what are considered modernized industrial countries like the US, Germany, Japan, France, UK, Australia, etc. I don't know if Thailand would be considered a developed country or if it's just the city of Bangkok or Chiang Mai. I don't know. I'd have to look that up. I don't even know if we use this terminology anymore, developed and developing. And I really kind of hesitate to use terms like that, but I guess on average, maybe better educated and healthier. But I don't know. It makes me feel kind of racist saying that, even if it's like factually accurate. I do know that this is true. The growth rates are lower, but I know even in countries like Thailand, you're experiencing a slower population growth than before, and it's really easy to look up lifespans and the length of lifespan, the length of lifespan for different countries. But I don't like doing that because it's not like we're smarter or anything. I don't think that's true at all. I'll take that out. All right, so 80% in developing countries. And again, I guess I have to go back and look to see if we're still classifying countries this way. But these, like Africa, most countries in Asia, Central and South America, were considered. Again, I'm going to have to see if this is still the way that we look at it. But absolutely, as far as economic, like GDP goes, like general domestic product, the amount of money that the country produces, they're generally less than in these countries than they are versus like Canada and Australia, the UK, the EU, things like that. And generally, they do have a higher population growth. But as I said, overall, over all of the countries in the world, I think a lot of countries are experiencing a slower population growth right now. All right, what is this? I forgot what this is. Let me go to here. Okay, so what's my place in the world population? How long will I live? All right, I will actually copy this and send it in the Line group, and then did I download Line yet? Yeah. And then you guys can play with it, because I think there's other things that you can do here. I'm just waiting for Line to go. All right, so here's also the world population clock. And then it tells you where those people are being born. So I'm just going to put in my information first. Date of birth, country birth, and sex at birth. Yeah, because it depends on when you were born and where you were born. So 0. Oh, oops. Hold on. Now Line won't see me. Yeah, I'll do it later. Day 01, month, November. Don't laugh when I type this. 1976. United States and female. How long am I going to live? Do I want to see this? It's going to be like, oh, 5 years. I am the 5,451,277,721st person alive on the planet. This means that you are older than 69% of the world's population and older than 58% of all people in the United States. I did see, I think that the average age in the US is now 38, which is a lot younger than I thought. So as a world citizen, this is where I am. Oop, no, I'm 45 now. Oh, sad. There's only 2.5 billion people older than me, 5.5 billion people younger than me. That's depressing. Imagine you lived today in a different country and with the life expectancy from a different time. How long could you expect to live? Oh, you know I got to do Thailand. Faux show. I've got 41.4 years of life left in the United States. Basically, I guess I'm going to die on April 6th, 2063. Cool. And I'm going to live 2 years less living in Thailand. So I'm going to die on Valentine's Day, 2061. Oh, that's funny. All right, let's see. The big milestones to expect in my life. 31st of March, 2026, I will be the 6th billionth person to be alive. That's pretty cool. I'm going to mark that in my calendar. That's only 5 years. 4.5, actually. Okay. This is pretty cool. Pretty cool website. You can put your own stuff in there and see, I got my little roadmap here to my life. I guess that's what I'm gonna bite the dust, I guess. When I'm 84, 85. Did I share a birthday with 263,000 people in the world? 10,960 people were born in the same hour. Anyway,